So my innovation is the dip and squeeze. Okay. Okay, takes a couple minutes. Before I talk about dip and squeeze, when we talked about that the public schools are 25 years behind the current research, okay, and I meant to mention this and I didn't, but have you heard this, that teenagers need more sleep? Okay, you've heard that? Okay, and it's not just go to bed earlier, right? Teenagers need more sleep. They'll tend to want to stay up late, but they still need more sleep, even that they need to sleep later. Okay? How does that mesh with the public school system? For you, it's no problem if you're still a teenager, because you say, I just won't have any 8 o'clock classes or 9 o'clock classes, or 10:30 is like, boy, that's prime time. We used to have 7:30 classes. Tuesday, Thursday, 7:30. You can't find one anymore, but we had lots of them. Okay? But anyway, when does high school start? So for teenagers, when does it start? What time? And yours was what?
7:15.
Anybody have a later one?
We started at 8:45, but if you had like a class, if you had like an off period, you did the start at like 10:30.
Oh, okay. So it's possible to start later?
Yeah.
Okay. So if the research says teenagers need more sleep, why are we starting at 8 o'clock? Why are we starting at some 7:45? Some schools have what they call a 0 hour that might start at 7:30. For some of you, you probably got to school there early. Anyway, it's like, what else to do? I had 2 brothers that were at school when I'd get there. The Gustafson brothers. I said one time, I said, Mike, why are you here? And they said, we try and get out of the house before Mom gets up. And I thought, after I got to meet Mom, I understood why she was nuts. But anyway, if you knew that teenagers needed more sleep, wouldn't you start school later? Wouldn't you? No, why? You know that they need more sleep. Why wouldn't you start school later?
Because the reason I picked this class is because it starts at 10:30, but then I just stay up later because I know I can sleep later.
But it's more than just for them to go to bed earlier. They need more sleep, and they want to sleep later. As far as not have all the research at my fingertips, but it's not just they need to go to bed earlier, but they need more sleep. They couldn't go to bed early enough to get enough sleep if we start at 8 o'clock. So they're sleep deprived. And so if you set that aside, that no, they just need to go to sleep earlier, why does school start at 8 o'clock or earlier?
I mean, that's like when you get into the real world of having a job this way.
Yeah, so Dr. White was here, and he taught the 4203 class, and they met at 7:30, and he would say that. He'd say, when you get out into the work world, you're probably going to have to be at work at 7:30. And I'd say, Dr. White, that's right, but when you're out in the work world, you probably don't stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning, or at least midnight. Does anybody go to bed at 10 o'clock like I do? Oh, some of you do? Okay. Do you?
At 4 a.m.
Oh, that's so. Again, I had a student one time in class, and he was kind of sleepy, and I said, "Hey, you need to get to bed earlier." He said, "I work at the dairy, and I've been up since 3:30." But there are some schools that are pushing back, at least high school, to like 9 o'clock. So Stillwater did that. Stillwater so you have 2 bus systems in Stillwater. You have elementary and middle school, and then you have junior high and high school that run. And they basically decided we're going to flip-flop those, and we're going to start the elementary school at 8 o'clock, and we'll start high school at 9 o'clock. And they did it because the research shows that. Maybe when your kids are in high school, maybe they will do that. They still might not do that because in education, when we've done this is how we do it. Animal Science 1124 is 9:30 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's just when it is. Ag Ed 3103 and 3203 for 70 years. Those are the 2 classes. Once we get doing something, we just love doing it. Change is very hard in education. And so it took monumental effort for Stillwater School to say, we are going to follow the research which says high schoolers need more sleep, and we're going to start that later. but they did it because they thought it was the right thing to do. How will they know whether that will pay off or not? I mean, they really won't know for sure. They'll have kids that will maybe complain less, parents that maybe say, well, then bad things happen between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock. I don't know. You know, curfews are a problem, or a solution that's looking for a problem. Most of the burglaries and things that happen are between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the afternoon when kids get out of school and don't have anything to do, so let's go terrorize the neighborhood. They don't happen at 11 o'clock at night. Catherine?
Well, my question is, how hard does that make it for a parent if it has to be, I mean, I guess high schoolers can drive.
High schoolers can be left alone, think back, more so than elementary can be left alone. So you'd say if elementary starts at 8, much better than elementary starting at 9.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Sanger would start 9, they had an opening, and so sometimes I would stay and they'd say the Pledge of Allegiance, they have announcements, and your kid would get a medal or something. So anyway, I'd go. And what I just thought was hilarious was there'd be some car pull up about 9:15, and mom is still in her jammies, and the kid kind of bails out, and it's like a mom overslept and couldn't get the kids to school, and then I suppose she's going back to drink some more wine or, start her day. But, I say, I'm not trying to be down on moms, at least ones that drink. Apparently that's the thing to do. But I think in that terms, it's easier to start elementary at 8 than it is to start high school at 8.
We went to Florida this last summer, and we were talking to some people that were from like a bigger city.
Yeah.
And they said their elementary school started at 7, and then high school started at 9.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that because of rush hour in the city.
Oh, now that's a whole other thing to do.
Yeah.
Not based on research, but what we have to do.
Yeah, and it was because they said the high school went later because then like sports practices were just part of like your school day.
Yeah.
And that's what they said. But they said their kids would get on the bus at like 6 in the morning to beat rush hour.
Oh yeah, that's crazy. The reasons we do things are kind of interesting. When do any of you remember when lunch started? Depending on for some people it's like 10:45, and it's like, why? Oh, because we don't have the cafeteria space. Well then, damn it, build a bigger cafeteria. I mean, why are we serving kids lunch at, so we wonder. So when the little girls were with us, so they'd get off the bus at 4 o'clock and they were starving. Well, yeah, they had lunch at 11 o'clock. They really were hungry. And so they got Nutella and graham cracker, and they couldn't dunk it in milk, but they were fed very well at 4 o'clock. And by 6 o'clock, they were hungry again. But that doesn't make any sense. And we have the school breakfast program now, right, also? So we have school breakfast about 9 o'clock, and then about an hour and a half later, it's time for lunch. Get out your chicken nuggets. And so the reasons we do things aren't always based on research. Once in a while we'll do that. Usually it's based on convenience. Back to dip and squeeze. 2011. Okay, so sometimes, for me that was yesterday. For you in 2011, you were starting 6th grade or something like that. But these haven't been around that long. Okay. Any advantages to them that you're aware of? It's loud.
Easier to open.
How, they as opposed to tearing that foil package. Okay.
Well, you don't have to even dip it. Like all your other condiments you get are in a little dippy.
What do you do with French fries? You want to dip them in your ketchup, and so if you don't, how much is in there? Like 3 or 4 packets, right? So this was CBS News covered it about 8 years ago.
There's no such thing as a perfect writer.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got
to check my book.
If I'm putting commas in the wrong places, that.
So I got a question for you.
Yes.
You go to McDonald's. You ever take a couple ketchup packets with you?
You don't take too many.
Just a little for extra for later.
Seeds.
Yeah, it could be a collector's item coming up because there is a big change for America's Top Ketchup after more than 40 years Heinz is giving up its ketchup packets, or rather giving them a makeover.
Yeah, and it's good news for consumers and bad news for dry cleaners. Michelle Miller has more.
It's as American as apple pie, burgers, and fries, and since 1968.
Since 68.
Consumers trust their fast food is with several sloppy single-serve packets.
Oh, I hate when it explodes. You open it up and you whip it too much, it explodes on your hand.
Now, more than 40 years later, Heinz has unveiled a new ketchup packet called the Dip and Squeeze. And this redesigned ketchup container does everything its name implies. From one end, the lid can be peeled back for dipping, while the other end allows the ketchup to be squeezed out in a bottle-like fashion. It also holds 3 times more ketchup.
3 times.
While several fast food chains are currently testing the new design, Chick-fil-A began carrying them earlier this year. And if customers at this location in Paramus, New Jersey are any indication, the new packets are a big hit.
Well, you're really easy to open.
I'm going to time you here. To see you. Okay, go.
Open.
Open. Just like that. In less than 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I like it because it's in a really cool shape, and if you like chicken nuggets or something, you could just peel it back and dip it.
Stuart Leslie is the president of Foresight Incorporated. His product and packaging firm worked with Heinz to develop a better packet.
The intention of this design is create a shape that really says to the consumer, this is enough ketchup for you to put on your burgers and your fries.
Michelle Miller, CBS News, New York.
You actually just missed Jeff got ketchup.
I wouldn't really care about him. Any thoughts about dip and squeeze ketchup? I mean, it's changed your life, right?
Because to Chick-fil-A gets ketchup. They have so much better sauces.
I just get ketchup.
No, on your fries?
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Also, Chick-fil-A sauce is like 140 calories. It's really a crap.
Not like there's not diet ketchup though. I mean, ketchup's pretty.
Unsalted ketchup.
I guess not.
It's the most disgusting thing in the world. It's just like
Tastes like tomato sauce. Yeah. So you want it.
I guess if you can't have too much sodium.
You want it sweet.
Give me the sauce.
Well, Whataburger, they had the ketchup too first. They had
The spicy.
They were early adopters.
I mean,
It's not dip and squeeze though.
they never had the squeeze.
They're so popular that you can, at least Walmart sometimes has them that you can buy the packets, so that if you're really addicted to that.
Do you think people actually buy it for their households? I'm just curious.
We do.
You buy them?
We buy the Whataburger squeeze bottles. Yeah,
Oh.
we like the spicy ketchup a lot.
Okay. She's talking. Yeah.
Oh,
Just.
you can
Yeah.
buy like the individual packets?
Yeah.
Oh, look at the good one.
Well, it depends. Sometimes you
My
can get them.
brother's friend, she used to buy them for like her kids, like she'd keep them in the car because it was easier when they went, like if they went to a fast food place.
If the place you're going doesn't carry those,
Yeah, she
we've
wouldn't
got
even
that.
worry about asking for ketchup. Like she would just hand them to her kids because she had like a 5 and 7-year-old, and they were easier for them to use than as easy.
Very interesting. But so there was a need. So from 1968 to 2011, we were doing these crappy packets. It took that long for somebody to. I mean, we had the need, but eventually someone said, "Hey, I got an idea." Or this company, and then I don't know what that's done for Heinz, but you don't have to have this other one. So this chapter deals with those kind of things that happen by accident, serendipity. Also talks about skunk works, how we can try and have a special group that might be trying to come up with innovations. If Oklahoma State University embraced this skunk works kind of mentality, what would it look like? Skunk Works is a special organization that's off by itself, that doesn't have to worry about being influenced by everybody else. They don't have a lot of rules. What would it look like at Oklahoma State if Oklahoma State said, "Hey, I think we need to do something like that"? And what would they be trying to find out or invent?
It existed?
No, you wouldn't know it existed. But if you were to create one, so first, that's an excellent point. First of all, you wouldn't know it was there if it was there. Good. What would they be trying to research or come up with? Any idea what Oklahoma State University does? They do something about with education. Yes. Yes. Gold star. Something. They're over there, it's a campus, and they might as well put a wall around it. You can't drive through it. But they do something with education over there. I'm not sure what it is they do. Okay, so an example would be some of the research that they would do, like with seed, they might have a special area. Okay?
Is it the land grant? Well, we'll constantly have to be researching stuff. I don't know.
Yes. We're researching, but would there have anything to do with maybe with education? Like new ways of teaching? That's a really great idea. New ways of teaching. They could be doing that. And so where would it be located? Other than Catherine says you wouldn't know that it's there because it's secret. Where would you put it? You'd put it where?
Towards like Young and Tulsa.
I don't know. You wouldn't know where it is, but someplace not on campus. Fair? Okay, so it wouldn't be on campus anywhere. It might not even be in Stillwater. It could be in Tulsa or Oklahoma City or somewhere else, or Duncan or Wapaneka or Teshamingo, or anyway. Could be all those places. You'd want it where someone wants to live, which of course would be Wapaneka or Tishomingo or Tahlequah. Talk?
Are we talking about extension?
No.
No? Okay, I didn't know.
It could be that Extension wants different ways of trying to diffuse technology out to people, and we're going to have this Skunk Works, and they're going to try and find different ways that we can try and teach people either formally in the classroom or informally or non-formally outside the classroom.
I don't know what they do. Like OSU is some form of research building.
Yes. Yes, we have our own building because we're trying to. Yes, so it could be like that. It could be on an institute. Yeah, nobody does it.
The Belmont Center is though.
The Bellman.
Yeah, the Bellman or whatever.
Well, it kind of, but just keep with me on the Skunk Works. Who would, if they're trying to figure out different ways of teach, broadly speaking, who would work there? And what would they do? They'd be researching different ways to try and teach. And that's all they would do all day long. And 10 years after they're there, maybe they come up with something. Or maybe they don't. But there's no pressure. They sit around and play games or invent software. Or, again, the Skunk Works, you're not connected to the institution at all. And you're just over there, you're just a think tank. And maybe some good things come out of it, and maybe they don't. But we've got money, and we're going to spend some money on this thing. And maybe something will come out like the McRib, or maybe it won't. That's what really the Kerr Center, the Food Processing Center, is really kind of charged with. Find the next McRib. Okay? The best we've been able to do so far is come out with a Vegas steak, which if you've had the Vegas steak, it's not anything to write home about. But, right? We invented a new cut of meat. All right, well, I kind of beat that. Look, so today I want to talk some about land grant, but I'm going to go the back door on it. I want to talk about extension just a little bit, and then we'll come around to land grant. So we're fast forwarding, but just a little bit. These PowerPoints are all posted in the supplemental section. But just some thoughts of extension, thinking of extension as being change agents. Okay? So for this chapter, where do new ideas come from? They come from serendipity, which means they just kind of happen. We weren't looking for anything. Rogaine, we weren't really looking for something to grow hair, but we found it. Post-it notes, we weren't looking for that. Warfarin or Coumadin, we didn't look for that. We were trying to stop dairy cows from bleeding to death. And then we have planned serendipity, which is the Skunk Works or Apple, which stole all those inventions from Xerox. So one way is they just happened, and the other way is maybe we can kind of water that garden a little bit, and maybe it'll happen, and that's how the Skunk Works works. Okay? And in terms of research, where these new ideas come from. They come from universities lots of times. Either they come from public universities or they come from private universities, or they come from research departments or R&D at these companies. So these are all places where, if asked, if this class is an innovations class, where do these innovations all come from? Well, sometimes they come by accident, sometimes they come planned accident, sometimes they're at private or public institutions, and sometimes they're at the research centers of major corporations. Okay? And so remember that R&D is research and development, and R always comes before D. Research comes before development. And at the university, if we had to put a word next to development, we'd say, well, that's really extension, or D is really diffusion, right? And how you get change to happen, one way is we throw money at it. And so from a historical perspective, history is more important to me as I get older. History will be more important to you and more interesting to you as you get older. And so I'm trying to interest you a little bit in some history, realizing that you may not be interested in it. So my job is to try and somehow, that there's some reason why you might be interested. The Land Grant Act of 1862 created land-grant universities. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to change education, and we didn't throw money at it, we threw land at it, which could be sold for money. We gave states land, which they sold for money, okay? And then they had money to build buildings, create universities, okay? In 1887, we had the Hatch Act, and it's the research that happens at land-grant universities. And how we got that to happen is we gave them a bunch of money so they could hire faculty members so they could do research. Okay, all back to money. In 1914 was the Smith-Lever Act, and the Smith-Lever Act created the Cooperative Extension Service, and we threw money at it by giving these 1862 colleges money so that they could supplement the salary for extension educators. And then in 1917 we created the Smith-Hughes Act, which funded vocational agriculture, and how we did that is we threw federal money at it. Okay, and so we took people that if you're a teacher, you could hire a teacher, and we will supplement your salary. And so Dr. Price, you heard me tell some stories sometime, who was department head here from 1955 to 1975. And he taught at Hitchcock, which is out by, again, Tologa in western Oklahoma. He taught at Westville, which is far east. But he said when he was in Hitchcock, he made $100 less than twice as much as the superintendent. Okay? He didn't make quite twice what the superintendent made in terms of salary, but almost. Okay? How is that possible? It was possible because there was a bunch of federal money that came to the school. Okay? And we had federal money that we used for cooperative extension to hire agents out in the field. We had money to get people at the university to do research, and we gave land, which you sold for money so that you could build a land-grant university. Okay? And so lots of times when we talk about creating change, we throw money at things. Okay? The big mistake in 1969 happened anyway, and we didn't throw any money at it. When we let girls in FFA, it's a big mistake. Don't. Okay, I thought you all knew what that was. Sorry. Anyway, in that case, we didn't throw any money at it. It happened. Okay. Okay. To flesh this out just a little bit more, in 1862, we started land grants because we really thought American agriculture was falling behind the Europeans, and so we needed to do research. And here, in 1887, we did the Hatch Act, which is we need to actually do some research ourselves. Okay? Here, we need to diffuse this research out that we've been creating, and then here in 1917, we need to get it for the next generation of farmers, and we'll start teaching agriculture, but specifically vocational agriculture, we'll start teaching in the public schools. Okay, so just a little reverse background. as we look at what the need was here, which should fit. Okay? And so how did in 1862, these land-grant universities, we refer to them as cow colleges still. What happened was that faculty were expected to teach classes and do research demonstrations and to write bulletins and travel around and do farmers' meetings. They were expected to do all those things, and that was a lot of work for faculty, and we're a bunch of whiners anyway. And one of the things they did is they would gather, those are cars, they would gather farmers together and have farmer meetings and educational sessions. One way that Extension specifically tried to diffuse innovations was through children. Okay? So we're in the early 1900s, and faculty wrote these bulletins or these pamphlets on how to farm better, and they found out that parents didn't or they couldn't read. Okay? Now those are two different things, but either they didn't read or they couldn't read, and so they said maybe we will go through the kids. Okay? And so they would have programs on Saturday morning where and this was not uncommon, on Saturday you went to town to buy things that you didn't have, salt, sugar, supplies, maybe you took some things to sell, but Saturday were days when you went to town, and while you're in town, the whole family would go. While mom and dad are doing their business, the kids were then shuffled off and have some educational programs on how to farm better, and that's how 4-H really developed. Those were called either pig or corn clubs or tomato canning clubs. The pig and corn clubs we're going to encourage you to grow 1/10 of an acre of corn and see if we can make $1 out of it, or raise a pig. For girls, it would take tomatoes that were grown and to can them, and then you could sell. And so they were entrepreneurial in that way, but in the process, we're trying to teach not the little girls how to can, we're teaching mom and grandma how to can. We're not teaching little boys really how to grow corn. The idea is they'll take those ideas and they'll tell grandpa and grandfather how to do this. So 4-H was all designed around trying to hit these things that we know, how to farm better, and let's take those and let's go through the kids and then to the parents. Is there anything like that done right now where we go through the kids hoping that it filters up to the parents? Can you think of anything in school where you learned and you kind of took it home with you, and in retrospect that was kind of by design?
In my household, it was recycling. They taught us how to recycle, and as soon as I learned how, I came home and I was lining up the house's trash, and I would get on to my parents about throwing something away when there's clearly a recycle bin right there.
How was that received? Do you remember?
It was like a school program. Somebody came to talk to us, and they did activities with us on how to recycle and what things to do.
Okay, so instead of that plastic, and then you looked on the bottom, and there were numbers. And so I guess we need to separate our trash. And you'd say, and I know where we can take it, or we already have a system. Recycling is a really good example. Think of anything else?
In my high school, my brother and I learned how to use our laptops, like research, like Google and all that. So we would go home and do it. And my parents were like, "What are you doing?" And we'd show them. And
Think of all the computer things, whether it's internet or email or all those things that came. Before that, it was basically language skills. Okay, we only speak German in this household. We only speak Italian, and so the kids, came home, and if the parents want to understand what they were saying, is we had to learn English also. So that happens a lot, or has happened a lot, where we used kids to make that change. I don't want to talk about that. Just some basics, because your chapter covers this. But in Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service, there's basically 4 different areas. There's agriculture, there's family consumer science, there's 4-H youth development, and then one that's not seen a lot would be rural economic development or rural development, which is trying to bring jobs to rural areas. And so you may have somebody who works for Extension, and they might be in any one of those 4 areas. Okay? So in terms of agriculture, if we're trying to think of them as change agents, what kind of change might we want to be able to create in young people?
Soil conservation.
We want young people to conserve soil.
I mean,
Okay, I'm going to take. If I said agriculture, what might we want? We might want them to use no-till, conservation till, put away the moldboard plow. Let me take your answer and put it in a different category, okay?
Like life skills.
Okay, now you're with young people?
Yeah.
Okay, give me something. A life skill.
I don't know, I think independence is really
Yes, the parents' greatest fear.
like going to camp and like getting experiences outside of the home that make you more comfortable with social interaction and being.
Parents' greatest fear is you're gonna be like my brother Tom. You'll be 29 when you move out. My parents are okay with that. I guess I don't know what's going on. Public speaking, how to run a meeting, learn parliamentary procedure. Anything else I want a change I want to bring about in young people, and I think 4-H says this. Mr. 4-H, something, anything. Civic engagement, yes. How to vote, how to be involved. I gave you those answers. You got anything else? Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah. Family consumer science, any change that we want to bring about there?
Learning how to sew.
What? I'm sorry.
Learning how to sew.
Learning how to sew, either as an adult or go back to the family consumer science, and what a great thing to learn from a youth's perspective. Anything else? Family consumer science.
Being a good consumer, like making wise money decisions.
Intelligent.
Yeah.
Okay. Why you don't get bug juice at the service station when you go to get gas? Okay, it's expensive. It's sugar water. It's going to rot your teeth. Dental health. Okay. How to deal with diabetes, how to reduce your sodium intake, healthy living, how to quit smoking, why you should quit smoking, how to can vegetables without poisoning your family. Okay. Rural economic development. What can we do to help people learn how to start a new business, a business of their own? Accounting principles, QuickBooks, tax, whatever, just ideas. So all of those are change agent kind of things. They're just at different level, right? Okay. So we're just again trying to get a broad overview of extension. If we're familiar with it, maybe exposing some areas we're not, and if we are really familiar with it, maybe just understanding this a little deeper. Where does the money come for extension? Okay, that's a good thing to know. Okay, and so this blue one here is the state. So about 75% of the money, the budget for cooperative extension, comes from the state. Okay, the federal less than 15%, the county less than 15%, and other would be like some grant stuff. And so one of the reasons extension has survived so long is because there are these three funding agencies. And so take one away and the agency still exists because they've got other sources of money. Okay? So as you look at that, is that a good design, or you're kind of surprised, or you've heard of this, that it's county, state, and federal, but this kind of surprise. Anyway, so this is reaction, something maybe as you see that.
I think it depends on what state you're in too, how big it is, like statewide. So like my mom's a county agent in Kansas, and so she was like a single rural county, and they cut her funding, so she had to district with another one because the state cut it, so they didn't get enough from federal or the county itself to stay stable long enough. They would prefer to hear about state funding.
Okay, Bree's saying, what if we, and this would happen, right? We cut at this state level. She says, what happens if we cut at the state level? And she's giving you a specific what actually happened. But if you cut at the state level, then what happens? There's nobody else to pick it up. So what's happened, this federal chunk here is gradually going down. Okay, it may be completely eliminated at some point. It just depends on the federal politics, but it's continually decreasing. Anybody explain why?
I mean, for us in Kansas, they said that they didn't need exchange anymore because like farmers didn't come in to get help. They were using the internet, and
Okay, so the federal government, which is made up of legislators from lots of states, may view extension as something that we don't need as much anymore, and so we won't completely kill it, but we'll keep squeezing down the amount we want to give. And say, we don't care if you have extension or not, we're just not going to pay for it. Okay? What about this section here, which is the county? That's kind of small also. So in Breed's case said, oh, well, the county can just pick up more. Okay? If you're in a rural county, in a poor, rural, southern state like Kansas and Oklahoma and Arkansas, like all of these are, there's no more money. What are we going to do? We're going to raise taxes. We're going to, as some have done, we're going to do a sales tax. And it's really tough. Okay? So it's great that there are these three, but there's a problem that this is going down, and this one in the county, and it was sometimes we'll say the county, the poorest counties are the ones that need extension the most, and they can't afford to do this part. And then the state, we've just gone through years of shrinking budget. The state's in bad shape also, and it's what's caused lots of states to say, we can't have county offices that's fully staffed. We're going to combine 3 counties or 4 counties together. And that isn't changing, and that model has been around. Oklahoma has really fought that. States have done that for 30 years. Oklahoma has fought it, and it's coming a little bit quicker now in Oklahoma.
Yeah, there's a lot of counties in Oklahoma that are going like the 3 county system.
Yeah, and so you could have an ag person, some specialization. I can think the first time I saw it, it was the early 90s, and I was teaching, and I went with my dad to a field day, and it's one of these where you get on a hay rack and you drive around, and the different speakers at the different ones, and it was a woman agriculture educator, which I'd never seen before. And so my dad's next to me, and I said, hey, how you like this woman extension agent? And he says, she doesn't know a thing, but she's really trying. And it's like, all right. And he was like, I don't care if she knows the things. Her job is to put this thing together and have really good speakers. So he's like, that's okay. But she was in charge of like a 3-county area where they put things together. But it's important to, just on a real superficial level, if to know anything about extension, that it comes from 3 sources, that the federal is decreasing, that the county, great if you've got a bunch of money, and the state is also. So like everybody's trying to shrink. It's like, crap, what does that leave us with? And then lastly, just because the university, how that's split in terms of FTE. FTE is full-time equivalent. Okay? Full-time equivalent. So like think of it as a position. And so those are all positions. If it's the division, it includes all the county staff, all the experiment station people, and all the college faculty. And so only about 9% goes to teaching. And remember we said that R and D are about equal. The experiment station and the extension are about the same. Okay, so 50% and 41, not too much different as far as the amount of funding. And probably what's going to happen, we're going to see a decrease in that extension part. To be honest, we're seeing a decrease in some of the research part too. I don't know if teaching will really expand or not, but just in terms of you are a student at a land-grant university, you know there's teaching, research, and extension, and that's kind of how it plays out. Question? Thoughts? Comments? Let's back up then and talk about how this thing got started with land-grant colleges. You are at a land-grant college. You were at Oklahoma State University. When it was a college, it was called Oklahoma A&M College. Okay, but you need to know a little bit about how Oklahoma State University is different than University of Oklahoma. I mean, off the top of your head, does anyone? There are 2 institutions that about the same size, right? How are they different? If somebody asked you, well, you must know, you are a student at a land-grant college. How are they different? Oh, okay, well, one has agriculture and the other doesn't. Is that where it ends? But okay, you've done your part. You said, got them started. You're going to ask somebody else. How are they different? We got Michigan and Michigan State. One's land grant, one's not. We got Florida State and Florida.
Isn't it like the research opportunities, especially when it comes to like, from what I've noticed, it's like the students have more opportunities to go on research.
You think if the kids go to OU to school, they don't have a chance to do?
They have less of an opportunity.
Really? It's not true, but that's interesting. Might have more at OU. Or zero U, as Rob likes to say. Katie?
Is it because of the way that they were started? Like, I know that Oklahoma A&M was started because wasn't it like technical programs for people in agriculture who had, is that right? I've read a lot of papers.
Yeah, how they started.
But then we still implemented these agriculture programs for students like us.
Yeah. So keep that in mind. That's how it started. And then the real question is now, how are they different? And so Bree said, well, we've got extension. Okay, we'll say, take that and just set it aside and say, okay, well, how are they different otherwise? If there's a history professor, how is a history professor at Oklahoma State and a history professor at 0U, how are they different? If they're, well, what?
How they're paid?
You think they're paid more at 0U or higher here?
No, but isn't it
where the money comes from?
Yes.
No. Well, grants are some, but OU gets all kinds of grants too. Katie?
Is it because we follow the triangle thing? Extension?
Whatever that means.
Like that's implemented into what we do?
Do you think that the history professor at OSU does a bunch of outreach out and does a bunch of things out across the state? Anyway, I just want you to be, as we're talking about this, to be thinking, great, this history is fine. But to understand where we are now, you got to understand this background. And then, I don't know, we'll kind of see what you think when we get to the end. If maybe they aren't as different as you think they might be. Okay. So in the middle 1800s, Jonathan Baldwin Turner, who was an educator in Illinois, said, I see that we've got two classes of people. We got these people that send their kids to college. Doctors, lawyers, ministers, that's about who went to college. The well-to-do go to college, but then there's this working class people, their kids don't go to college. And he thought that maybe they should go to college. Couple that with what we said is the American agriculture saw that we are way behind with what's going on in Europe. And our productivity is like this. Yields aren't going anywhere. And maybe there's some scientific agriculture that we need to be discovering. And so Turner had this idea that have this national agriculture school. Okay? And so what happens at West Point? That's a national college for the Army. Okay? We have a national college for the Air Force. And where is that? Colorado Springs. We have one for the Navy, and it is at Annapolis, Maryland. So we have these national colleges, or war colleges. And he had the idea what we need is need a national agriculture college where the best and brightest go, and they'll study agriculture, and they'll come up, if West Point is to come up with different ways of killing people, we'll have different ways of trying to feed people before we try and kill them. Okay? And that just didn't seem to go anywhere. And he lost election, and so he had this idea, and he sent it to Justin Morrill. On campus, there is a Morrill Hall. Almost every land-grant college, there is a Morrill Hall. Have you ever been in Morrill Hall on our campus? Susie, do you know where it is? On the way to Stonewall Tavern? Yeah, I thought she'd say. Has the great big columns and the steps going up. Why we are not in there, I don't know. Except that it burned and then English got it. But we should be in Morrill Hall. Okay? But we're not. Anyway. So he introduced this legislation which was to basically develop colleges for the common man, is what we called it. President Buchanan, who was president at the time, vetoed it even though it passed, because at the time there was southern states were complaining that the federal government was overreaching. Okay, they wanted to do things like make it illegal to own other people. Okay, and the South said, "I'm sorry, but that's okay in our book." And so, oversimplifying, anyway. And so he vetoed it because the South wasn't going to like it, even though it passed. Well, then after the South decided they wanted to be a country of their own, they left. And in '62, with all those Southern negative votes gone, and with a Republican president, Abraham Lincoln signed legislation creating the land grant system. And we'll always talk about an 1862 school. Okay, that's what it is. It's an 1862 school. A couple other things happened at the same time. The Homestead Act, and they created the Department of Agriculture. But the Homestead Act gave you 160 acres if you go settle that area and live there for 5 years. Okay? So if you'd go and settle that farm, I don't know if you had to farm, but you had to live there for 5 years, then that would be yours. And so when we talk about people being homesteaders, they were a homestead because it was the Homestead Act, which happened at the same time as the Land Grant Act. And also, then the Department of Ag was created. But what happened was every state got 30,000 acres for every senator and representative they'd have. Keeping in mind there are different numbers of representatives, but every state's got 2 senators, so you at least got 60,000 acres. Okay? Now, where was the land? Most of the land that was available was federal, was out here. Okay? That land that was homesteaded, it was out there. Okay? So we buy this land from France, okay, the Louisiana Purchase, but nobody lives out there. And the thought was, we got to somehow move that land from federal hands to individual hands. Okay, so we got to populate it also. So again, this area out here, people where it was available, 160 acres, or that 60,000 or 100,000 acres or whatever it is that you got for your college, that was out there somewhere. So Illinois didn't get 60,000 acres in Illinois. They probably got 60,000 acres in what would be Montana. Okay, so if you were in Ohio and you were given that money, Katie, what would you do with it? You were given land in Utah or Montana or Wyoming. You would sell it. And what happened was it flooded the market. And so land prices went from like $3 an acre down to $1.25. And so, great, if you were selling at the time, you were screwed. The federal government just did something really great, which is mess with you. On the other hand, if you wanted to establish a large Ted Turner-sized ranch, it's great because land prices went down. And so you think, how did these large ranches ever get so big? Well, that was one way they could buy 30 or 60,000 acres at a time. Okay, so these states all were given that land, and then they sold it, and then they had some money, and with that money then they could build buildings to establish an institution. Okay? The Act also made provisions for if you were a territory. Okay, so this is important. This is 1862. Oklahoma became a state in 1907. So how is it that Oklahoma State was founded in 1890 and is considered an 1862 institution? It's like these numbers aren't, even though they're dates, they're not all following, right? There were provisions of this act that even though you weren't a state, you could have a college. And so these are all territories still, and they have land-grant colleges. Puerto Rico has land-grant college. Micronesia has land-grant college. So does Samoa, and so does Guam. And so if those ever become states, and probably in your lifetime Puerto Rico will, there is already a land-grant college there, and they had that foresight. So Oklahoma, as soon as we became a territory, it was like, good enough, okay, we're going to establish a college. And so what happened when settlers came to Oklahoma during the first land run, and they established areas, the folks in Stillwater said, we need to go get something, and we know that there's a college that we could have. Okay? And McAllister said the same thing. And some people in McAllister said there's also going to be a federal prison. Let's go for the federal prison instead. And Stillwater got the college. I don't know. Probably the safest place to be is McAllister anyway. But anyway, that's why it's here and not in McAllister. Okay? Okay. Now, how am I going to do this? Can I do a... You guys show me how to do a Zoom... Shoot. Why can't I just make that bigger? Just don't, there it is. Whoops, went too far. Okay. I don't know. We can start with the Northeast. These are the land-grant colleges. Penn State. Cornell is interesting because Cornell is half private. Cornell's an Ivy League school. It's half private and it's half public. Virginia Tech is the land grant. University of Kentucky is the land grant. Purdue is the land grant. So you have Indiana and Purdue. So most have a large state institution and a land grant that are of comparable size. Okay. So you have this idea we need to create a college for the common man, which we did. But then there's the other people who say we need to have a state-supported college for the not common man, for the uncommon man, for the people that we want to go to school to be doctors and lawyers and ministers and poets and songwriters and things like that. And so in Oklahoma, that institution is called University of Oklahoma. And then we had what were called teacher colleges. Okay? UCO was a teacher's college. Easy Credit at Ada was a teacher's college. Okay? I went to Illinois State University, okay, at Bloomington Normal, and it was called a normal school. A normal school was a teacher's college, and most of those were 2 years, some less than that, and then eventually they became full-fledged institutions. But a normal school is a kind of school. It's called a teacher's college. Anyway. But that's not the land grant. The land grant was University of Illinois. Wisconsin, California, we can talk about those a little bit later, a little different. Missouri. And so those are down south. We have LSU, we have A&M, New Mexico State, Arizona. The University of California System, Oregon State, Washington State, and University of Idaho are separated by, I think, about 7 miles. North Dakota is right on the border, Fargo there. Minnesota, Iowa State. And so again, you're saying, oh, Iowa, Iowa State, Nebraska, that's all there is. North Dakota, there's no University of North Dakota. Ole Miss, Auburn, and what's the other school in Alabama, the good school? University of Alabama, the good one. Georgia, Georgia Tech, Clemson, and University of South Carolina. North Carolina State and North Carolina. Right? Okay.
It's University of Mississippi, but they call it Ole Miss.
It is. Yeah. University of Mississippi. Anybody? Some questions say this is really weird. I always wanted to know anything.
Actually, California.
Yeah.
So it goes to the system. It doesn't go to California.
Okay, so there's 2 systems in California. Nobody from California? Okay. So you have the University of California system. University of California at Davis. University of California at Los Angeles, UCLA. University of California at San Bernardino. So one system, but lots of campuses. Then there's the Cal State, California State University system at Cal Poly, at Pomona, so they have, again, just like University of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, you just have 2 systems with lots of different campuses that to a certain extent compete with each other for state money. Sometimes they kind of go together. Now, one difference is Wisconsin, and Wisconsin said, they had all these different campuses, and Wisconsin's pretty progressive. And they said, we're fighting among ourselves. And so they decided and did the same thing in Minnesota. One system, and so you have University of Wisconsin at Madison in the middle, Platteville, Eau Claire, Green Bay, Milwaukee, Stevens Point, I don't know, 10 or 12 different ones. And what they try to do is they try and specialize. So there's natural resources at Stevens Point, but not other places. There's nursing one place, there's engineering at Milwaukee. And so in Oklahoma, where you have all these institutions, regional institutions kind of competing with each other for students, Minnesota and Wisconsin said, let's not fight among ourselves, let's kind of have some specializations and be more efficient. They spend a lot of money, but they tried to be a little more efficient. Whether it's worked or not completely, can't really say. And same for California. These two systems, but again, all these different campuses got so many students. Anybody else? Okay. Because they flooded the land market, there wasn't near as much money available as they thought there would be. Okay. People thought these were cow colleges, meaning they really didn't teach much. They were not very good schools. And when they tried to get more money after the Civil War, we had segregation in the South, and Northerners didn't want money to go to the South if they were going to have segregated schools, segregated land-grant colleges. Okay. And so, finally in 1890, they got the second land grant. It gave them more money, and it established land grants in segregated states if they would create another institution that was equal for the African Americans. Okay, and so that was the compromise. You don't have to allow blacks into your university as long as you'll create another institution that's just the same. Okay. And they said it was that the money should be equitable, and there was a big difference between what we meant as being equal and equitable. Okay. If you believe these people that you used to be able to own have their own institution, you don't have to treat them equally because you don't think they're equal, so you don't need to split the money evenly. Giving them a little bit of money probably is more money than they need. Okay? Because they can't vote. We don't want them to vote. We have an idea of where they would go as far as occupations, which is to serve you. And so what it meant was these new colleges that are 1890 schools didn't get much funding. Okay? And so having grown up in the North, I had no idea there was such a thing. Okay? If you've been in the South, you've heard of them, but you may not understand exactly. But they are referred to as historically black land-grant colleges, and they were founded in 1890. Okay, and so when we zoom in here, it's easy because it's all in the South. We'll start here. Okay? Missouri was the farthest north, and so Missouri was kind of split Confederate Union anyway. There was lots of issues, but they established a separate institution. That's Lincoln University. In A&M, Florida A&M is the one in Florida. Prairie View A&M is in Texas. Southern is in Louisiana. Let's see, Alcorn or Alcorn? You don't say Al right. It's Alcorn. Pine Bluff, West Virginia State, North Carolina A&T, Agriculture and Technology, South Carolina State. So they established these separate institutions, and they funded them very poorly. Okay? If you've never been through Langston campus, you'll see that it's very poorly. So you go south on Western, go on 33, and it'll bypass it completely, but you have to take a little detour, and you just go through, and same with Prairie View A&M, there was no equity. You know, this was over 100 years ago, and you'd say things weren't treated equitably at all. But these are referred to as historically black land-grant colleges. Did the same thing as 1860 institutions, but just for, because they were segregated, just for blacks. Questions? Can't believe we did that? America's the greatest country in the world. Okay. Then we have, okay, now it gets a little more complicated. Then we have something called 1994 land grants. Okay. What happened was that kind of some struggles. Native Americans said, whites got 1862 institutions, blacks got 1890. What have you ever done for Native Americans? So Congress said, yeah, I guess we should do something. And so they created what are called 1994 land grant colleges, and most of them are two-year schools. For a long time, there weren't any in Oklahoma, but the Creek Nation has one now. Most of them all are two-year colleges on reservations. Most of them are up here in the north, although Haskell Indian Nation School there. How much money flows? I was at a conference, how many years ago, and I talked to a guy, I think he was from Haskell, he might have been from Nebraska Indian, and I said, hey, great, you guys are a 1994 school, what do you get now? And he said, we get $20,000 a year. And so he said, but it's not the money. What helps is we're a land grant, and lots of times, a lot of federal grant things, they'll say, so if Cammie Grace is going to do a grant proposal, they'd say, you have to have an 1894 partner and an 1890 partner, and so you're forced to collaborate with some other schools. That's probably the best thing that has happened, is they've said, you need to collaborate, and you need to have those 1862 schools help you some. Unfortunately, what a lot of times is we just throw some money at those schools, and that's about the limit to the help they receive. I don't know if it's Bacone or it's the College of the Creek Nation, but I don't know if that's Bacone or okay. And they closed down for a while last year, and then are back operating again. They're back again, but they had to sell a bunch of property. They're hanging on by a thread. St. Gregory's closed. I don't know if they're gonna survive or not. Okay. Then there are things called sun grant institutions. So think revolving around solar energy. And Oklahoma State is a sun grant. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It means that we had this land grant thing, and that really sounded kind of cool, and it was a catchy name. And so we said, okay, if we're going to do some solar stuff, let's call it Sun Grant. And all it is kind of a consortium of some universities going together and saying, okay, we're going to work on some solar research and some switchgrass research together. Okay, but there are Sun Grant institutions. Believe it or not, there are Sea Grant institutions, and they're supposed to be working on, obviously, things relative to aquaculture. University of Illinois, and here, really important why they're working on sea grant research, because they're 100 miles from any water, and that's Lake Michigan. The other ones make a lot of sense. Let's do some aquaculture research. I think it says how powerful Michigan State and University of Wisconsin and Illinois are politically. I think that's all it really says. And I really think this is cool. So, okay. And then finally, you guessed it, there are space grant institutions, and they're trying to get, we're just trying to grab money is all we're trying to do. And so let's go together and see if we can't get some of that money that we're giving to NASA. Okay. Okay. Now, if we go back and look, really here, and it doesn't matter really where we zoom. As you look at where institutions are, does it matter, do you think? Does it matter that Oklahoma State is here? Does it matter that West Virginia is here almost in Pennsylvania? Does it matter here that Virginia Tech is here almost in West Virginia? That Clemson is almost here in Georgia? The only thing maybe as far as the research that goes on is it tend to be regional. Maybe one thought about that. Okay. One part that's problematic is that each one of those institutions operates independently doing their research and extension. And in the past 30 years, I can only think of one example where there's been cooperation, and it's between my home state of Illinois and Wisconsin. And Illinois, largest soybean producer, and Wisconsin, at one time, largest dairy producer, but the two of them got together and said, listen, in Illinois, there's a bunch of dairy right up here in the unglaciated area. And in Wisconsin, there's some soybeans grown and some potatoes and tobacco down in here, but that's about it. And so Wisconsin said, you know what, Illinois, if you'll do all the soybean research, we'll do all the dairy, and we'll share information. And it's like the first time any of them thought of it. And it's like, wow, how much savings we could do here. And again, in 30 years, that's about the only example I can see, other than sometimes institutions go together with stuff. Okay? But Arkansas and Missouri and Kansas State and Oklahoma State, and Mississippi State and Tennessee and Kentucky will all do research and fact sheets on blackberries and blueberries and vegetable gardens and tomatoes as if there wasn't any overlap. And there's huge overlap. So just like counties share, I think in your lifetime, we're going to see a bunch more sharing in extension and in research. Some regional areas, 3 or 4 or 5 states go together because there just isn't going to be enough money still available to do all these things. Okay. Well, let me go back to where I started and said, what's the difference between University of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, or pick any of the other ones, Michigan, Michigan State, Auburn and the good university, Florida State and Florida. What's different between, take the agriculture part out, take the extension part and say that's just a separate thing, I can just carve it out. What's different? This land grant, we're supposed to be serving the state. So it's the common man. We have agriculture, we have engineering. Well, they got engineering at OU too. Any that you see? So some of you are aware that we're taking the last 2 years of the Ag Leadership degree and we're putting it online so the kids at MIT, at Tishomingo, NEO, and Connors can get a degree and not have to move to Stillwater. As far as Penn and I are concerned, we're doing there isn't a better example of the land grant mission. We're trying to take the college out to the people, trying to make education accessible to people. Okay? It's a pretty good example, we think. We think that's what we're supposed to be doing. Beyond that, beyond what I'm doing, there isn't much going on. There really isn't. And so you'd say, well, does OU, do they do anything to try and work with people out in other areas? Well, to a certain extent they probably do. But does a history professor, does an economics professor, does a human science professor, does a psychology professor? I don't know. Does a faculty member at University of Tulsa, which is a private school, do they work with, let's say the College of Education, do they work with the schools in and around Tulsa? Well, yeah, they do all kinds of staff development programs. So this idea that you're serving the state or serving the community, private schools do that. Other large research universities that aren't land grant do that. We do that. Some people think that who serves the common man now are 2-year schools. Tulsa Community College, Murray, NEO, Connors, Eastern, Western, and the common man is somebody who just is a regular person. When we started, there were no admission requirements. Okay? And so if you serve the common man, you'd serve anybody, and you'd say anybody should be allowed to come and try. Right? Okay. Any thoughts about that? Would you like it to be just anybody could come and try at Oklahoma State?
And then how is it prestigious
Well, you could say it's really rigorous, but anybody can try. Maybe not everybody's going to do it, but everybody can try. It's tax supported. Taxpayers pay for it, so shouldn't their kids be able to come here to school? Which is exactly what most two-year schools are, is you got a GED, you got a diploma, try. If you flunk out, that's your business. But we're going to keep it cheap, okay? Not going to cost a lot, and you're going to get a chance to try it because you're just children of the common man. The downside of it, if you said school is cheap and anybody can come, how long does it take to flunk out? I don't know. Has anybody been in that situation? Maybe a couple of years. And so if I'm a taxpayer and I'm paying money, and you're going to go to OSU for 2 years, and it's going to take that long to figure out that you're not going to do it, I don't know if that's really good use of my tax dollars. So I might, as a taxpayer, say, hey, let's try and let's make sure the people that are trying have a good shot. And if they can't get in, then they could go to that 2-year school, which some would say are fulfilling this land-grant mission. They're taking care of the common man. Okay. Then there are institutions like my master's degree, University of Illinois, which entrance requirements have gotten so high that lots of people can't go there. Okay. Texas A&M, lots of kids can't go there. Okay. And so then the question is are we serving the state or not? And so at University of Illinois, to increase the prestige, we want to get kids from other states and international students. I want the smartest. I don't care who they are, where they went to school, whether their parents paid taxes or not. We want to be the Harvard of the Midwest. Okay? And so if we want, that's what's taken over. We don't want to serve the common man anymore. We want to serve the prestige of our institution. And so, again, to understand where you are, you got to understand a little about where you came from as far as an institution. And then there's just the everyday realities. Then what do you want your institution to do? Do you want to serve regular people? And if you do, then it's fine. And if you want to be more prestigious, then you're going to cut out some of the people that might attend otherwise and whose families might pay taxes. Some also suggest that we used to be a state-supported institution. Now we are a state-assisted institution. And in the future, Oklahoma State and OU will just be state-located institutions. Because we're in a climate of, I don't want to pay taxes. And OSU's allotment from the legislature is going down, just like extensions. And so they used to pay more. You are now paying more. Students pay more, and the state's paying less. And we don't see that changing anymore. Or we don't see it changing anytime soon. The idea that people, general public would say, if you have to pay more tuition, that's okay because I want to pay less taxes. I mean, it's pretty much as simple as that. In order for OSU to get more money, they would have to pay more taxes, and they don't want to do that. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying we're in a climate where people aren't voting for tax increases, and that's not going to change. And so those of you getting closer to graduation, you may feel pretty good because tuition is going to continue to go up. Get your degree and get out of here. We just don't know when you have children what you should do with them. Not sure what you should do with them. Okay. No class Tuesday. Thursday's chapter 5. There's a homework, but you don't have to have your homework done by Thursday because you might not know how to do it. So I think I have it scheduled, I don't know, like for Saturday or something. If you feel comfortable, you say, oh, I think I understand it, it's posted, great. But if you don't, we'll talk about how to do it in class. Okay? Enjoy your Super Bowl holiday.